Hello and welcome. Today we will look at the combination of two Tunisian simple stitches together and Tunisian full stitch. If this is your first time, thank you very much for stopping by. My name is Mirka and I make stitch and pattern crochet and Tunisian crochet tutorials. So if this is of your interest, please consider subscribing. And without further ado, let's dive in. As I mentioned in my intro, we'll be looking at the combination of two stitches, which is Tunisian simple stitch 2 together and Tunisian full stitch. I've already created a tutorial how to create a beautiful lace structure using these stitches when they are aligned, and today we are going to be looking at what happens if these are offset between rows. So as you can see, I've got a swatch created here, and we are going to look at how to make these in just a second. So as per usual, we'll start with a slip knot, and this stitch combination is worked over an even number of stitches. So we need an even number of stitches. One, two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the beginning, and now we are going to be working into the back bumps of your chain stitches. So this first row in Tunisian crochet is also known as the foundation row. The working into the back bumps of chains is a preference that many makers have that create Tunisian crochet projects. You don't have to, you can also work into the top or bottom chains. Working into the back bumps of chains gives you a really nice and neat bottom edge of your work. So this is something to consider. Once we've got the forward pass on the hook, where we add the loops on the hook, we work the return pass of chain 1 and then yarn over pull through 2. We repeat yarn over pull through 2 all the way to beginning of the row. So again, this is known as foundation row in Tunisian crochet. And now we will start our stitch pattern. For the first row of our stitch pattern, we will be working 2 Tunisian simple stitches together, followed by 1 Tunisian full stitch. So what we are basically doing, we are decreasing and increasing stitch to maintain the stitch count. So Tunisian simple stitch is worked from right to left under the front vertical bar. So when we are working 2 together, we are going to go under 2 consecutive front vertical bars, yarn over and pull up a loop. And now we find the space between the last stitch of the 2 Tunisian together and the following stitch, and we place a stitch in the space between from front to back. So we are inserting the hook from front to back, yarn over and pull up a loop, and we repeat Tunisian simple 2 together and Tunisian full stitch. Again, 2 Tunisian simple together, full stitch. Now we get to the end of the row. With the last stitch, we will do something slightly different. We will work under 2 bars of the last stitch, right at the edge, yarn over and pull up a loop. Okay, so we started with 8 stitches, and we should end up with 8 stitches after the first row. If you maintained your stitch count, that means you increased and decreased the right number of stitches. Now we work the standard return pass of yarn over pull through 1 or chain 1, yarn over pull through 2, yarn over pull through 2, all the way to the beginning of our rows. So this was the first row of our stitch pattern. For the second row of our stitch pattern repeat, we reverse the stitches. So while before in the stitch pattern row number 1, we started with 2 Tunisian simple together, followed by Tunisian full stitch. Now we start with the Tunisian full stitch between the first 2 stitches, and then work Tunisian 2 together. Again, Tunisian full and 2 Tunisian simple together. Tunisian full. So we should end the row with 2 Tunisian simple stitches together and the end stitch. Again, double check the number of stitches. We've got 8, and followed by a standard return pass. So once you've got your 2-row repeat setup, you will be repeating the rows 2 and 3 for the desired length of your project. So I'm going to work a few rows at a faster pace, and I'll meet you at the end to show you how you can bind off your project. Once you've got your project more or less done and you are on the last row, you've got 2 options here how to bind off your stitches. One is to do Tunisian simple stitch bind off, where you work Tunisian simple stitch and then you pull through the loop that you just created, or the stitch through the one that was already on the hook, and you will work this for every stitch in your last row. And this is the way that you would bind off majority of your project. It's very easy. The downside is that because we are working Tunisian simple stitches, the last row of our stitch pattern looks like a row of Tunisian simple stitches. So if you prefer to maintain the stitch pattern repeat, or the way the project looks throughout, you would do something slightly different. So I finished on row number 3. So I would now maintain the stitch pattern and go on to the repeat of row number 2. So this would be Tunisian 2 simple stitches together and Tunisian full stitch, with pulling through the loop that is already on the hook. So you maintain the stitch pattern and bind off the stitches as you work the stitch pattern. So the difference here is that, as you can see, the stitch pattern is maintained right up to the very last row, and then the top edge looks like the bottom edge of chains. So if you prefer to have that look of the stitch pattern repeat throughout, right up to the last row, this might be the option that you go for. As always, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate your lovely comments and suggestions, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.